Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber, and alongside me is Logan Camden, and we have so much to talk about in the NBA right now because in a lot of ways, we have a new landscape in the NBA. So many stars were moved at the deadline, which means we have so many new look teams to discuss. And today, that's all we're going to be doing. We're just going to be talking about the debuts and the new look rosters that we've seen around the league. And Logan, we have to start with the big one that we saw last night, Luka Doncic. Putting on the purple and gold for the first time as a Los Angeles Laker, a surreal moment for many of us. It ends up being a dominant win for LA over the Jazz. Based on that first game, how are you feeling about Luka as a Laker and the potential that this team has?
I think the Lakers are going to be dangerous, Carson. I really liked what I saw in this game. Now, the one caveat I will add about this, it's against the Utah Jazz, so we'll take this with a grain of salt. But
yeah.
Luka gave you 14, 5, and 4 in just 27 minutes of play. We got some, I think the signature moment for me at least was that full court pass from Luka to LeBron before the end of the first half. They end up putting up 72 first half points on the Jazz in this game. With Luka on the floor, the team also posted, and again, these are individual game numbers, so do with these what you will. They had an offensive rating of 134.7 and a defensive rating of 102. So, I mean, just a smashing success in their debut. And just the gravity and seeing it on the court, the magnitude of this team up between two all-time basketball players. I mean, Luka is second in career playoff points per game, just behind Michael Jordan. He accounts for 49 points per game. If you include points and assists per game, that's the most in NBA history. He's the NBA's active points per game leader, and you're teaming him up with the NBA's all-time leading scorer. And you've paired two guys up who were both top 10 in career points per game. I mean, this is
And they're both better as passers than they are as scorers.
I mean, it's almost unfathomable. Like, this is a pairing of unparalleled basketball intellect, brilliance, and ability. And I know that we always talked about, like, the transition of power, right, between LeBron and Anthony Davis at the end of the Lakers' tenure, right? It was going to be LeBron passing the baton to AD into this new era of Lakers basketball, and that AD would be able to alleviate this pressure off of LeBron. I think Luka can do even more of that, considering how much he can initiate from the perimeter and how much of this load he can take off of LeBron. And so I wonder if he could extend LeBron's career even more so than we may have previously anticipated. That's long term. But specifically looking back to this season, I expect the Lakers offense to be among the best in basketball, specifically with how Luka changes other players' roles on this team. One, Luka and LeBron are both guys that make every single player on the floor better. They elevate and they amplify everybody. They create real advantages, and they both demand extra defensive attention, right? So the foundation of the Lakers offense is Luka and LeBron, but with the infusion of Luka here, it just changes guys into roles that I think significantly fit them better. Roy Hachimura, right, isn't going to have to create a whole lot for himself. He can play a spot-up role, which is awesome. Rui's an awesome offensive player. He's a 44% catch and shooter. He's an 82nd percentile spot-up player. And so he's going to be doing less, but he might be producing more because of how good his shot quality and all the things that are going to be generated for him are. Austin Reeves is a 37% catch and shooter. He's been having an awesome stretch of basketball. And again, you're taking a guy who is your lead perimeter initiator and you're having him take a back seat where, again, I think his looks are just going to be more high quality. They're going to be better. He has to create less for himself and do more off ball. Jackson Hayes, I mean, he's super limited as a complete basketball player, but he's a 77th percentile role man. And you think of the archetype that fits beautifully with Luka Doncic and the guy that could enhance him to the best of his abilities, it's Luka, right? I mean, just as a simple role man and lob threat, I think LA is really dangerous. After seeing this and seeing what they could look like moving forward, I think they're actually a better team than they were before. And I know they were playing great basketball with AD, right? The defense was great. The offense was clicking. They seemed like they were figuring everything out. But I think they're better than they were before the AD trade. More importantly, I think they're a real contender with an identity now. Like, the Lakers have something that they do arguably better than any other team, and that's just that they can run a track meet. They can just play, they can run it up. They can play purely offensive basketball. Like, it's like the Pacers last year in their Eastern Conference title run is what I would equate it to, but I think their defense can actually be better than the defenses they put out because I do like some of their personnel, and I like the sacrifice for defense to go all in on offense because I just think it's going to be a really hard offense to stop with a lot of different offensive combinations. The one that we saw them try out in the third quarter, I really like that look, right? If you're going to run Hachimura at the 4 or the 5 and DFS and just go full small ball where you're saying, all right, we're going to space out your entire defense. You're going to have to cover every inch of the court in half court, and it's just going to be, the spacing is going to be phenomenal. And, their defensive personnel is limited, and I think that's ultimately what's going to determine the ceiling that this team can reach. But I do like some of the guys, right? I like DFS. I like Vando. I like Jordan Goodwin. He was playing his ass off last night. Hayes can do a little bit of stuff. It's not great, and I think that there are certain matchups that I'm worried about. The Lakers in the playoffs, like Memphis, it's a big-ass team, right? I worry about the size dynamic between them and Memphis. Dallas, right? I worry about the size dynamic and athleticism mismatch between them. But, again, they have an identity. They have a formula, and they have something that I think they do better than a lot of teams in the West, and that's just that they're going to be one of the best offenses in basketball. So I love it, Carson. I think it's a home run. I think Luka and LeBron are not only going to coexist, I think they're going to flourish. And, I think this offense is going to be one of the best in basketball, man. I was really, really encouraged by the first game we saw with Luka here.
The offense is going to be awesome. I think that that's been apparent since they made the move for Luka. This should be one of the greatest offensive duos that we've ever seen, and offense has never been the issue for this team. They have a lot of good spot-up shooting around those two guys. They have one of the better third options in basketball in Austin Reeves. There's just so much talent on that side of the ball, and we didn't necessarily see a ton that would lead to any revelations in this debut from Luka. Unsurprisingly, he was very much just feeling things out in this game. He's coming off the injury. He's in a new situation, so not super aggressive as a scorer, a little bit jump shot happy maybe, which he really has been all year. Like under 10% of his shots are coming inside of 3 feet. That number just continues to trend down for Luka year after year, but fresh off an injury, you're not expecting him to be super aggressive, trying to get downhill consistently. Only one shot came at the rim in this game, but that's fine. You see how special his playmaking is. You see it with the drive and kick passes. You see it with his ability to manipulate defenders with his eyes, move guys, to free up kick-out passes, to free up skip passes. You see it with his ability to feed Jackson Hayes with a couple of lobs, and Jackson Hayes will never look better in his entire life than he will playing with both LeBron James and especially Luka Doncic. Like, I'm not a big Jackson Hayes guy, but he is going to produce reasonably well because playing with these two is the biggest bonus that a lob threat big could ever have. And we know who Luka is as an offensive player, as a scorer, as a creator. We know that he's one of the best we've ever seen. The interesting part to me about how he is going to fit in LA is how he and LeBron complement each other directly, and how does he deal with playing off ball some more, because I do think he'll have to learn how to play off the catch more effectively. We've seen him do a little bit more off ball stuff over the last couple years in Dallas since Kyrie was brought in. We've seen him improve as a jump shooter, which has made him a more effective spot-up player. But now he's playing with both LeBron and Austin Reeves, who's going to have the ball in his hands a good amount, and he's really, really good. Obviously, Luka takes priority, but all of these guys are going to have to find ways to succeed on and off ball. And you do see in this game, Luka just isn't somebody who's used to playing off the catch and making quick decisions there and attacking quickly, right? He catches what could be a wide open spot up three, and instead he says, okay, I'm going to pump fake and I'm going to step back. That's his tendency. He is so used to playing with the ball in his hands. But I think he certainly has the shooting ability to be a solid off-ball player, and I think that's something that he'll just get more comfortable with. And like I've talked about, I want to see him doing some of the Austin Reeves stuff where he's screening for LeBron and slipping screens, setting ghost screens where he's getting open for three. They're creating switches. I think there's a lot of potential there if Luka's willing to buy into it. And you see the potential in a couple actions in this game where LeBron is screening for Austin Reeves off ball at the elbow, and that forces a switch, and Luka feeds LeBron, and the defense collapses, and LeBron finds Rui Hachimura for a wide open three. There's another action where Jackson Hayes is screening for Luka off ball, and LeBron is initiating, and he gets Luka the rock as he's curling around the screen, and Luka finds Hayes on the roll for an easy lob. Like, the aggregate playmaking between these two players is nothing that we've ever seen before. Luka and LeBron are way too smart, way too great to not make this a home run offensively. It's the greatest passing duo we've ever seen. It's the greatest mismatch attacking duo that we've ever seen. So there's just basically nobody who can handle both of these guys on the court at the same time. When you're talking about two A-plus players when it comes to identifying your defensive weak point, hunting that player, and going right at him and bullying him, who are then also A-plus all-time decision makers and passers, where if they draw a double, if they collapse the defense, they are going to dissect you for it. Two guys like that, it's overwhelming. We really have never seen anything like it. And the team that I think is best equipped to handle them defensively is Boston, just because they have a Jaylen Brown and a Jason Tatum, but like, it's so rare that two teams have multiple high-level defenders who are also big enough, strong enough to deal with dudes as strong as Luka.
I think Golden State's got decent personnel just with Jimmy and Draymond.
Jimmy and Dre, sure. The problem with Golden State is I do think they also have easier weak points to attack, because with Boston, it's like, if you are targeting someone, it's Drew Holiday or Derek White, who are still these massive plus defensive guards, stout, low center of gravity guys.
What about OKC? I mean, there's Dort.
No, not in this matchup. I mean, they have the best collection of perimeter defenders I have literally ever seen. But the one dude who is like stout, the one dude who is a really good Luka or LeBron option is Dort. Everybody else, I think these guys can move around. I think they can go through. Like, that's the challenge of it. It's that combination of power and playmaking that in one dude is a nightmare to deal with, and they have two of them. So it's so special. And by the way, you have one of them on the floor at all times. So your offensive floor is so damn high because you either have these two force multipliers who I do think are going to work together really, really well, and then you have like two phenomenal offensive floor raisers who either one can float you on their own offensively. And you know what's probably scarier for everybody else, Logan, than anything that we saw from Luka in this game? Just the level that the Lakers have been playing at overall, and the level that a couple of their other key guys have been at. Since Christmas, Austin Reeves is giving you 21.6 points and 7.4 assists per game on 62.5% true shooting. And maybe his volume is scaled down a little bit now with Luka. I expect it to be. But he's so damn good as a pick and roll creator, plays with such good pace, gets to the line, great intermediate shot maker, great pull-up shooter. He's a problem there, and then he's also a good playmaker. He's an 81st percentile pick and roll creator, and then he's a 90th percentile spot-up player. Like, he's lethal as a catch and shooter as well, and he is really comfortable with some of the off-ball stuff that we'll see if Luka can really embrace. And LeBron, since Christmas, is giving you 26.2 points and 9.1 assists per game on 64% true shooting. He had his little lull earlier in the year, but he has been phenomenal offensively for an extended stretch now. He's literally peaking as a shot maker right now, Logan, at 40 years old. And I don't know if we talk enough about how crazy that is, but his top two seasons of his career in terms of points per jump shot, last year and this year. I mean, over these last 2 years, he's over 40% from three. It's unbelievable.
I wish we had the data dating back to like even the 90s. I feel like that was the same thing for MJ when he got old too, man. I mean, he became a lot more jump shot reliant. He was still really, especially before that injury in his last season, like MJ was uber effective as a jump shooter in those final years. But is that even true for last year? Because I mean, he was over 40% from deep last year, dude. That's ridiculous if he's even gotten better.
Well, last year was his highest in terms of points per jumper.
You're just saying
1.11.
These
this
last
year
two
is his second highest.
That's
ever,
ridiculous,
at 1.04. And this year is his best mid-range season in a long time. It's the second best of his career. He's 43.5% for mid-range. Like, it's incredible. He can just kill you with shot making at this stage. So he doesn't have to be the
And
same
LeBron's
one-of-a-kind athlete he used to be.
And LeBron's still such a freak. It kind of goes back to that thing I always talk about with De'Aaron Fox and Anthony Edwards. LeBron is such a physical freak. You go, all right, man, well, look, as long as LeBron isn't putting that big-ass shoulder and bicep into my chest, I'm okay with him shooting that jumper.
But he has been damn good on those jumpers. So it's an insane offensive big three.
They're all hitting their stride at the right time, too. I mean, this is the time to be working out the kinks and figuring it out. And there's a lot of good shooting down the roster, too. I mean, just offensive ability in general. If it's Reeves, if it's Hachimura, Gabe Vincent's been giving you really good minutes recently, too. Like,
yeah.
I really like what the Lakers are putting together. And DFS is a stud. I'm really encouraged.
Offensively, they could easily be a top 3 unit in basketball. I fully expect them to be at least a top 5 unit. Nobody else has 3 perimeter creators like this. 3, man. Like, Austin Reeves is that good. He's at that sort of sub-star level where he obviously is not remotely comparable to these two, but as a third option, he really is in the upper echelon. And the Lakers are 11-2 in their last 13 games. And in that stretch, they haven't just been elite offensively. They've been the number 1 defense. Now, that to me is going to be everything in terms of determining just how serious this team is. What level can they reach defensively? Because for most of the year before this recent stretch, they were a really bad team defense. I do think the addition of Dorian Finney-Smith has been really beneficial for this team defense. He has maintained, Logan, a plus 14 on-off differential across 2 different teams this year. That is impact from a role player that I can't recall seeing just in terms of pure on-off differential. Like, he's been such a good spot-up shooter. He's such a good defensive player. I love Rui Hachimura offensively. DFS should be starting over him because this team just needs his defense much more desperately. But the offense is there. It is in the top tier in the NBA. Can this defense be mediocre is the question. Like, I think if you're expecting this to be a good defense, I understand how they've been defending as of late. They still just don't have the personnel for that. And the real major concern is that Jackson Hayes is your lone big. And Jackson Hayes has been solid defensively. But, like, in the non-Hayes minutes, you're going small ball. You're going with LeBron and DFS as effectively your 4 and your 5, and maybe Maxi Kleber comes back later in the year. And, like, you can make those lineups work. But you mentioned some of the problematic matchups. You run into a Denver, you don't stand a chance.
I think there's 2 distinct archetypes that could really punish LA defensively, and that's one, the really dominant interior big. If you're talking about a Jokic or even a Big Zoo, like, those guys can just physically overwhelm whoever's out there. If it is Jackson Hayes, right, like, they don't have an answer. And those really dynamic guards, like, I think Anthony Edwards would have 100%. A field day, right? Like, there's just... That's why I do think that the style of basketball that the Lakers are going to have to play is going to be very Pacers-esque last year. I think it's going to have to be, we're going to go and we are going to score every possession, and you're going to have to stop us. Because I think it is going to be really, really problematic in certain matchups in the playoffs. Like, and that's what I want to be clear about. I don't think the Lakers are going to go down without a fight. I think whoever they run into, LeBron and Luka are going to keep throwing punches offensively, but it's going to be really hard for this team to generate stops against some of these stars.
Totally, dude. Because you mention it. There's the lack of big depth and just not having a starting caliber big to begin with. Jackson Hayes is not that. He might look like that with Luka feeding him lobs all day, but he's not. So that is going to be a nightmare against Jokic and Denver, who they've already shown no ability to stop when they had Anthony Davis. Major downgrade there. Now, but you also mentioned, like, any elite guard is just going to feast on this team. DFS is a really good defensive player. He's not built for that matchup. Your defensive backcourt is Austin Reeves and Luka Doncic. Like, who was chasing Steph Curry around screens all day? Who was staying in front of Ja Morant? Who was staying in front of Anthony Edwards? Like, they're just in a really, really difficult spot defensively. So I'm glad to see that they've gotten engaged and that they've been defending so much better as of late. But long term, I still view this as probably one of the 10 worst defenses in basketball. And that just puts a ceiling on what they can be. So I'm seeing a lot of excitement about how the Lakers are going to go all the way. And, like, the offense will put a scare into anybody, and they can outscore just about anybody. But can they get to that solid defensive level you need to be at to be a serious playoff team, no matter how great your offense is? I still don't think so. But that's the thing. If they can do that, that's huge. That's massive.
And that's what makes the Mark Williams deal being rescinded so much worse, right?
Yeah, man.
I think you hit the nail on the head on Twitter because I know a lot of people were upset about it. Look, if Mark Williams' condition is really that bad to where the Lakers are scared of acquiring him and giving up those assets, then it's the right decision. Like, whatever that physical told them, I mean, it had to be damning, whatever they found in there. That's just smart, right? Like, I get that that's the biggest need for the Lakers, and I want them to acquire an impactful big and a guy that can at least end possessions, get rebounds, and be a big body, right? Because, I mean, at the end of the day, you just need somebody strong, somebody that's built that it can at least bang a little bit with Big Zoo, that can bang with an Edey, that can bang with a Jokic. If you don't have that guy, you're just giving up way too much size, where I do think those are problematic in the playoffs, where as high as I am on the Lakers, I'd pick them to lose to Dallas. I'd pick them to lose to Memphis. I might pick them to lose to the Clippers if they have Kawhi, right? Like, it's too glaring of a hole right now. So I still do think they need to acquire someone, but I fundamentally think that if Williams' injury report is that bad, I think they made the right decision by getting those assets back. You just can't take that risk.
I totally agree. Like, for this year, it is a big bummer because although I think some people maybe thought that Mark Williams was further along defensively than he is, like, he's a hell of an athlete. He is a massive human being. He has defensive potential, and then offensively, he was going to be a perfect fit alongside Luka and LeBron. Elite lob threat, has some more touch and skill as a finisher than a Jackson Hayes, has some more playmaking feel than your average run-of-the-mill rim-running center. Like, that would have been awesome, and then Jackson Hayes could have been your backup center. You would have had 48 minutes of center play. That all would have been great. But if you saw something that concerning in your medical evaluation of him, then just get out now. Because we already know he's played 85 games in 3 years up to this point. He's had consistent back issues, and it sounds like something else showed up that really concerned them. Mark Williams is very, very talented, but you should not be giving up another first-round pick, which was kind of your last bargaining chip, and then a pick swap, and then also Dalton Knecht, who is a talented young player, if it is for a guy who you don't think is going to reliably be on the floor. And that was always my concern with the Mark Williams move. I was like, I like it. It's a major, major need, and it's a very talented young player. But you have the defensive questions, which is what this team needs most from their center. And the guy has not been able to stay on the floor, which is why I sort of said at the time I would have preferred if they had pursued a safer option. And it ends up being they couldn't find that guy. It's a bummer. Could they have gotten a Walker Kessler for a similar price? Maybe not. Maybe Danny Ainge wouldn't have moved off of him. Could they have gotten a Jakob Poeltl for a little bit less to get that defensive value and that availability at the least? I tend to think that they probably could have, but they didn't. They swung and they missed, but at least they got out of it and they got their assets back, and now you move forward next year knowing that you took a hit in the short term, but that you protected yourself in the long term, because this year is not the most important thing. The most important thing is what you do over the next decade plus with Luka Doncic.
Did you see that report that, I don't know if this was real or not, apparently LeBron's team took issue with the fact that it took them getting Luka to part ways with the first. And it's like,
I did see
guys,
that.
Get your head out of your ass, man. Come on. Also, speaking of Jakob Poeltl, we're not going to talk about this in depth today, but news just broke. Brandon Ingram just re-upped with Toronto for 3 years, $120 million, so he is going to stick around.
How about that? Even without Williams, even with the center situation being as dire as it is, I have decided this offense is so great. This team has shown enough defensive competence, although, again, I still have a lot of concerns about that end, that I would have them above Houston. I would have them as my sixth team in the West right now, and the margin is not all that great between them and a Memphis, them and a Dallas who is in their own predicament now. And like health is a bigger concern for some of these other teams. If it is Dallas now, if it is the Clippers. But the other good thing for the Lakers is they're putting themselves in position to host a playoff series.
Mm-hmm.
This team is in the 4 seed right now. So that's a big advantage, and they can definitely win a playoff series. Do I think they can make a Western Conference Finals run? That would really surprise me because I think that Denver is an absolute death sentence for them. I just think then you're running up against another team whose formula is all offense, but they're an even better offense with the greatest offensive player ever and a supporting cast that has complemented him so well. Denver has their defensive issues. I still think that they are a more solid defense that has shown you in years past their ability to get serious on that end.
I think Jackson Hayes is going to be barbecue chicken in that matchup.
Oh my God, it's over. Yeah, it's over. And you can say, well, who's guarding Luka? And that's fair because Christian Braun is not built for that matchup. Peyton Watson can come in his stretches and I think actually fare decently well, but it's outweighed by Jokic being able to get literally whatever he wants.
The last thing I want to add on that, to touch all bases, I was talking about the potential disastrous defensive matchups for Los Angeles when we're looking at jumbo-sized teams like a Memphis, like a Denver. That is true. Offensively, the Lakers pose problems for a lot of teams that are interior-oriented, though. And on the inverse of that, I think if we're looking at them offensively, I mean, they're just going to be hard to stop because they're going to space out the entire floor, which means in a hypothetical matchup against a Memphis, Edie's going to have to be on the perimeter more. Triple J is going to have to be on the perimeter more. And I'm not saying that you could play those guys off the court, but it's like the Lakers have enough shooting and such high-level playmaking and such elite perimeter creation that I do think they could just outshoot somebody in a playoff round and that be the complete difference maker, right? Like, I don't love those matchups for LA, but I do think there's a world where they could just outshoot a team in the first round and that be the difference maker because of how elite this offense is going to be. But I think that's about the right spot for LA. And I don't know how you feel about this. And I don't want to come off as like just a negative Nelly about Houston. I think I would have Golden State above Houston as well, man. I like what Golden State is cooking up.
We'll get there, Logan. Don't you jump the
My
gun.
fault.
But I think that that's a conversation that can be had. And I would prefer LA just because, like, when you have 2 half-court surgeons offensively, the defensive issues absolutely matter, but they matter at a point where I have faith in the other team's offensive competence, which I don't have with Houston. And with even Memphis and Dallas, it's close, man. It's close. Like right now, I'll say, okay, those are the teams with the better depth, the more complete rosters, the better two-way teams. But that margin is slim because I really do think that this LA offense is that crazy. And like it's Luka and LeBron, man. It's not crazy to bet on them dominating an offensive series to the point where nobody has answers. But we'll see what this team can do defensively. To me, that is everything. But the Mark Williams news was crazy, man. I can't think of a time that I've seen that multiple days post-deadline where a trade is rescinded, but I do think that they dodged a bullet. I don't see them contending this year with this current big situation, but they've put themselves in a better position to contend next year, a couple years down the line, by holding on to those assets. But, Logan, of course, there were 2 parties involved in this deal, the craziest trade in NBA history. The Dallas Mavericks saw Anthony Davis debut. He had a phenomenal debut, and then he got hurt, injured his groin. Reporting is that he's going to be out several weeks to a month, potentially even longer than that. It's really not clear at this point. First of all, Logan, what did you see from AD in his debut before he went down? But also, with his injury, do you think that Dallas is in danger of missing the playoffs entirely?
There's a chance. I have a lot of faith in Kyrie and Klay stepping up their game and this aggregate depth. Like, the Mavericks are by no means dead in the water. AD, I do think, made a critical mistake rushing back from this abdominal injury. Apparently, it's a left abductor strain. And just, in my opinion, when you're a superstar, you just can't do that, especially with a guy who's injury, history is a laundry list. Like, I think AD made a critical mistake. I get it. You want to get out there. You want to build the chemistry. You want to make your debut in front of the fans. Like, I understand it.
Well, how about Dallas? It's on them to clear.
And I agree.
It's on them to say you're
I
good
agree,
to go.
man. Like, I get that there's a desire to rush him back and to get him out there as soon as possible just because there's such heavy backlash from the Mavericks fans, right? You want to see that immediate reward so that they can stop holding their pitchforks and being so angry, but it's just not worth it in the long run for Anthony Davis's long-term health or for the implications of this season. Like, if you're going to play him, put him on a minutes restriction, and if you're really that concerned, just don't play him, man. Just give me a week, right? Like, that's how I've always felt about it, man. Like, if you're working out and you're sore, or listen to your body, so I think this was a critical mistake, but I really did like what I saw from Anthony Davis before he went down. I mean, the guy gave you 26 points, 16 rebounds, 7 assists on 10 of 18 from the field, 2 of 2 from deep, 4 of 6 from the line, and he had 3 blocks. Now, similar to what I said about the Lakers against Utah, I think this is a matchup that Dallas should dominate. This is against Houston, and when we look at their Dallas's newly constructed front court, they should physically overwhelm a team like Houston. As athletic as they are, as much as they fly around the court, like you've got Gafford and AD down on the block versus Sengun. There's just a strength and a physicality difference with Dallas. And I will say, I don't know the last time I've seen Anthony Davis play with this kind of intensity and vigor. Like, he looked fired up. And I really like this situation for Anthony Davis. For Dallas as a whole, obviously I think they got worse. Obviously they lost this trade. It's a catastrophically bad one. But specifically for AD, I do like this situation. I think he's got a better perimeter initiator in Kyrie Irving that can set him up for easy shots. Like, obviously he played with LeBron and he played with Austin Reeves. I think there's a different level of ease for a guy like Kyrie in setting him up for shots on the roll and stuff like that. I just think he's a more seamless fit. And I think the Mavericks have significantly better defensive personnel. You mentioned it earlier that Los Angeles was finally hitting their stride. This has been a bad defense on the entirety of the year. And AD is as much of a one-man defense as you can get outside of like Wemby, maybe a Mobley or a Chet Holmgren or something like that. There's some really good young defenders in the league nowadays, but he is as close as you can get. And there's significantly better defensive personnel here, which I really like. Specifically, AD playing the roamer role. I mean, that's just scary.
Yeah.
Like, he can just take more gambles and make more big defensive playmaking stops. I think that's deadly, but you're flanked by guys like PJ. So I really like this for AD. And if Dallas can just get into the playoffs, because I think that's unfortunately their dilemma right now, is just crash in the postseason party. They should have an elite defense, and I think they match up well with a lot of the teams in the West. Denver, right? You're thinking about what you need to do to counteract a Nikola Jokic. Well, I think Anthony Davis and Daniel Gafford are Lively is about as good as it gets. Memphis with Edey and Jaren Jackson in their jumbo lineups. All right, well, we can counteract that. Houston, I think they've got a great answer for them. Golden State, right? There's just a different kind of athleticism and physicality that Dallas possesses that I think could overwhelm a team like Golden State. And that's the most interesting thing about this to me in the West. Carson, you and I can do all of these thought exercises, and we can power rank and rank all the teams out West. What it's going to come down to is matchup dependent across the board in the Western Conference. Like, we can draw it up however we want. That's going to be the most important thing. Seeding and matchups in the playoffs and availability when we get there more than anything else. So the biggest concerns to me with Dallas are if they get in and their general injury concerns with an Anthony Davis. He's got to be fully healthy or you are dead in the water. You have no prayer of making it through the Western Conference. Now there's an amplified offensive creation burden on Kyrie Irving that he's going to have to take on. And there's less spacing and less margin for error offensively. It was a really successful debut for Dallas. We also saw their offense run a little bit cold in that third quarter. That does concern me a little bit. But I do think Dallas is going to try to mitigate some of these spacing concerns by having AD initiate a little bit more and maybe be a little bit more perimeter oriented if that's him running inverted pick and roll, if that's him just spotting up more and playing a little bit on the perimeter. So I do think AD is going to have to hit threes and have to hit mid-range jumpers. But he seems comfortable with it. Dallas seems comfortable with it. And I think it's probably the best route. So teams can't just, we're not going to go back to 2012 and run two bigs on the low block and just, you don't want it to be that clunky.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the goalposts have changed, so to speak, for Dallas. You've got to get AD fully healthy for the playoffs, and you got to crash the postseason party. But I'm fairly confident with how Dallas matches up against a lot of these teams out west, and I think they've got a distinct strength, athleticism, and physicality advantage that a lot of teams just can't match.
They should be insane defensively when they're healthy. OKC is a historic defense that is now fully healthy again, so they are obviously the best defense in the conference. After that, I'm probably taking Dallas over everybody else in the West defensively. The Clippers are great. The Rockets are great. Those teams are definitely in a very similar tier, but this should be one of the best interior defenses that we have seen ever. You think about how disruptive the rim protection you were getting just from 48 minutes of Lively and Gafford was last year in the playoffs. Such outstanding interior defense, the ability to pack the paint and just take away those opportunities inside for opposing offenses. Now you have Anthony Davis roaming. You have Anthony Davis on the glass as well. Like, they should just completely dominate on the interior with rim protection, with rebounding. And you saw that when AD was on the floor, man. He was balling on both sides of the ball, but defensively, players shot 1 of 8 when they challenged him at the rim. He had 3 blocks, and then offensively, you mentioned how they need him to step up and be more of a spacer and perimeter presence. He was doing all of that stuff. He was running inverted pick and roll. He was isolating. He was feeling his jumper. He was creating offense for himself and others. His passing was impressive. His first play as a Mav, he posts up and throws a lob to Daniel Gafford. It was awesome. It was awesome. That bodes well for the viability of the dual big looks, right? AD's ability as a passer, as a short roller, out of the post, like just feeding his other big in the dunker spot, that really has to happen for this offense to work with 2 bigs on the floor at once. And game 1 was a positive indication for that. Like, he was just so good all around. He gave you 26, 16, and 7 on 63% true shooting in 31 minutes. And then he goes down. And by the way, Lively was already out. Now Gafford yesterday sprained his knee. He's going to be out for a little bit. It's unbelievable how unfortunate everything has been for the Mavericks organization over the last couple weeks. For the fans, I should say, because unfortunate isn't the right word. When you trade away Luka Doncic, you do that to yourself. But just the confluence of events here, it's really, really difficult. And that's why they are in a precarious position when it comes to the playoffs, because they have been so banged up throughout the year. They're currently 1 game ahead of the Suns right now, who are in the 11 seeds, so they do not have very much margin at all. So I do think that they're kind of in danger of missing the playoffs. It would surprise me because they don't have the hardest remaining schedule. Kyrie has done a really good job of floating the ship without Luka this year. His individual efficiency isn't great, but the offense in games that he plays without Luka has an offensive rating of 117. That's like equivalent to a top 7 offense in basketball. They're 13-10 in games that Kyrie's played without Luka this year. Now, if they also don't have a viable big other than Dwight Powell, that is definitely a concern. And these next couple weeks, or however long Gafford is out, might be really, really rough. But if he does get back out there on the floor, and if Lively and AD are able to get back in about a month, so they can still give you, say, 15 games of the regular season, that home stretch, I just think Dallas is better than everybody else in this race.
Sorry, not to cut you off. Is Lively going to be back in a week or so? I mean, Is
he going to be back that soon?
I mean, I think they kind of... I don't know. I don't want to rush guys back from injury, but I think they need him.
I don't think he's going to be back that soon. I mean, he fractured his ankle not that long ago.
Dwight Powell's not the answer, man. I'm going to be honest.
No. So they said the timeline was at least a month on January 23rd when he fractured his ankle. So best case scenario would be he comes back in 2 weeks. So I think that they kind of have to plan for however long with no bigs, however long Gafford's out, which hopefully shouldn't be too long with just a knee sprain, and then maybe a couple more weeks of him being your lone big, and then hopefully you have Lively and AD back out there.
That's such a bad break, man.
Such a bad break, dude. Ridiculous. All in one position.
We think it's bad now. Let the Mavs miss the playoffs, man. They might burn the stadium to the ground.
For real, dude. And that is why one of the fundamental reasons that the Mavs made this trade was so unbelievably stupid when they're talking about conditioning and availability with Luka. Like, you are actually going to make the case that 25-year-old Luka Doncic, who has missed one extended stretch of basketball in his entire career, and it's right now, is more of a concern when it comes to being on the floor than Anthony Davis, who I think is underrated, who I think is a superstar when he's healthy, who I think is a clear top 10 player, who got super disrespected in all of this Luka trade discourse. People acting like he was a bag of chips to get back. Like, no, Anthony Davis is awesome, but he is not Luka, and he is 6 years older, and he is more injury prone. So, like, all of that stuff makes it still one of the most mind-boggling decisions ever. But overall, I still think that they should get in. And if they get in, I'm picking them against anybody else in a play-in setting. Now, it's dangerous. You don't want your season coming down to one game.
Well, and the other part, what's really unfortunate about the play-in too, is if you get in and you get in as the 8th seed, you're marching likely to your death sentence against Oklahoma City.
Right. And the Mavs probably feel as good about that matchup as any 8 seed could. But yeah, I still think that Oklahoma City wipes them. I think that as great as Dallas's defense is, still not as dominant as the Thunder's. Mm-hmm. Although there are matchup things, right, on the glass, just with their size. But
still, I mean, I think Oklahoma City can match that physicality now if they have an available Chet and Hardenstein to limit that.
Definitely at least more than they have been able to historically.
And I mean, they have like the best amount. They have a myriad of defenders who can match up really well with Kyrie Irving and just make life hell on 100%. Him for all 48 minutes in every single game.
Could not agree more. And they have so much rim protection on the floor. They are going to be better as a rebounding team than they've been historically. And the real gap, and it's a big one, is offensively. They have an A++ operator.
I think you got to get that. If Memphis stays in that 2 spot, I think you got to get the 7 seed.
Yeah, I think that is a series that Dallas definitely could win. That would be a gritty series. That would be a grind. But again, I think that the Suns suck. I don't really see them taking that spot. I might be more worried about the Spurs, but the Spurs are 3.5 games back of the Mavs. Like, it sucks that this is a conversation that we have to have because of injuries, but we've seen them do well enough with Kyrie out there on his own and with the depth of this team and with their defense that I think they'll be okay. And when it comes to the playoffs, I do still think they're definitely a team that can win a series. Do they have the offensive punch to win multiple? Probably not, but they're going to make life really hard on anybody opposite them to score. That's their advantage at this point. That's the trade-off that they made because I think Nico Harrison is just obsessed with defense and hates Luka Doncic. I will say, Logan, Max Christie has been hooping for Dallas. 17, 5, and 3 on 69% true shooting with the Mavs, doing a little bit more with the ball in his hands. He really started to play well for LA over the last month plus, but we're seeing some stuff from him. Dude, I think he's a really good rotation player.
I like him and his brother, man. I like Max and Cam both, dude. I think they could be good, good rotation guys for a long time, man.
There's just so many good wings in Dallas. Najee, Christie, Clay.
Surplus
of good wings. PJ Washington, obviously. So I get it. The trade is an abomination, but this is still a team that should be good this year. They got worse, but they should still be good if they can stay healthy. That's the big question at this point. Who's scoring big in the NBA this season? You are, with all the new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. From monster slams to dishing the rock to cleaning the glass, get behind your favorite players and the prop bets you can make on DraftKings, the home of NBA player props.
Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like picking how many points your favorite player will have. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. First timers, here's something special just for you. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly.
Take it to the rack with DraftKings Sportsbook. Every point counts. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. There was another big move made in the West, though, Logan. The Warriors went out and got themselves Jimmy Butler, and a lot of people really were very critical of this move. They did not see the vision. We're only 2 games into this whole experiment, but the Warriors are 2-0 in the Jimmy Butler era. How have you liked his fit, and how much does this change things for the Warriors this year?
I mean, it takes them out of the tier that they were in. The Warriors were firmly in the bounced in the first round tier, and now they are scrappy contender. I love the Jimmy Butler move. I don't know how you can't not like it if you're tapped in to Golden State. They're so much better. I mean, 2 games, Jimmy's giving you 23, 5.5, and 5 on 62% true shooting, and they've got an offensive rating, again, this is 2 games, of 125.6 with Jimmy. Now, I do want to give the Warriors credit as a whole. I think this team has just been playing good basketball. A lot of guys top to bottom. They're actually 10 points better without Jimmy offensively through these 2 games. They've been putting up crazy offensive numbers. Steph has been going crazy too. But Jimmy specifically is the most complete player I think Steph has played with since KD. And this is no shade at Draymond Green, but there's just a different level of individual scoring impact that Jimmy can impose on the game by himself. He impacts every facet of the game. Offense, scoring, and playmaking. Defense, on ball, and off ball. Rebounding, offensively, and defensively. And he's impactful in the half court and transition. And I think he's the best scorer that Steph has played with since KD. And I love his addition to this offense and this team and how it opens up their competitive window a little more. I made this comparison last NBA show. The Thunder have a garage door of a competitive window, just a huge. Warriors have a small crack in a window, but it's there. And specifically how Jimmy does that, he helps so much offensively. In these 2 games, Jimmy's averaging 14 free throws a game. Yeah. I mean, just that alone is such a huge difference maker for Golden State. Being able to have somebody that can just take this anvil, this Atlas-sized burden off of Steph's shoulders. I mean, he is the world right now. He is the only thing propping this offense up. And Jimmy alleviates that burden so much. And that's a huge component to me. Just having a guy that can get into the teeth of the defense, that can get downhill and make things happen. But that's not his only impact on ball. He can be a great screener. You can put Jimmy in the dunker spot, and Steph and Draymond can find him. You can have him go one-on-one with guys on the post when he's got a mismatch and go get an easy bucket. And he can cut off ball. He just has such a versatile impact in the game. And now you look at the Warriors in totality. You have teamed up 3 brilliant basketball players. Draymond Green, Stephen Curry, and Jimmy Butler. Guys that just know where the ball needs to go. They know how to play with one another. And that's my favorite part about this, is I think all these guys complement one another, and they're all so smart. Like, also, Jimmy looks like he's having fun again. Like, Jimmy looks like he wants to play and wants to play hard, and there's just a fire that has been relit in Jimmy Butler that I really like and that I've seen on the court, and I think he just feels more confident about this team as a competitor. And like I said earlier, the Warriors are just playing good basketball in general. All these role players, Pods. I think Moody has been playing good basketball. I need some more from Buddy, but I really like where the Warriors are at. And over some of these teams that I may have questionable concerns about with their offense, specifically Houston, I think I have Golden State over Houston. I just don't have as many. Look, and I know they can probably out-physical and out-athletic Golden State in some games, but there's a different level of faith I have in Golden State's offense now with the introduction of Jimmy Butler, and I really like this. Carson, I don't get how people don't like this move for Golden State. I think that is a fundamentally just wrong take. Jimmy does a lot for this basketball team, and he impacts the game in every facet. I love this move for Golden State, and they have firmly moved up in the West for me. Again, I think it's really matchup dependent, and I cross my fingers for Golden State that they get into the playoffs and that they don't draw one of these jumbo-sized teams, because that's where specifically I am a little bit worried about the Warriors if they get Minnesota or a Memphis or a Dallas, right? Like, I think those are problematic matchups for Golden State, but they're way more competitive than they were before this trade.
I have been so encouraged by what we've seen so far. And you talk about people being low on this move, man. I think a lot of people forgot about Jimmy. I think between the injuries and the moaning and him playing 30 minutes a game this year.
You don't do it, man. Did we not learn 4 or 5 years ago, man?
No, man. I was getting the Jimmy is washed replies. Jimmy is a star. And of all of the new additions that we have seen fit in with their new teams post-deadline, this has been the one that has impressed me most, just in terms of how seamlessly it has fit. Because I liked that the Warriors went out there and got Jimmy. I thought they desperately needed that talent upgrade. I thought that the price was pretty good for them to do it. I thought they need that other shot creator alongside Steph. And I was optimistic that the fit would be okay because of what Jimmy can do off ball as a cutter, offensive rebounder, stuff that we've seen him do before. But I still wasn't sure how good he would look in this sort of motion offense. It's not something we've ever seen from him before. He often has had the ball in his hands a lot. He is not quite a non-shooter off ball, but he's a low-volume three-point shooter. He looks uncomfortable taking shots off the catch. He's got that flat-ass shot that is just much better from mid-range than it is from deep. So I sort of felt like it would be maybe a mixed bag in terms of his pure fit off ball, but 100% worth doing because of the talent upgrade. Dude, he has done everything to fit into this offense, to maximize his impact. It has been so impressive how he's acquiesced. He is screening willingly. He is rolling willingly. And then he's either rolling hard to the bucket or he's making decisions for you as a short roller. He's cutting willingly off ball. I think his passing has probably been most impressive and most valuable, though. And that's where you just see the immediate synergy between him and a Steph and a Draymond. These high IQ basketball players with incredible feel who have been doing it for so long, like Draymond in the dunker spot, Draymond cutting from the weak side corner, like Jimmy is always aware of where he is on the floor. We saw him just dissecting the Bucks zone the other day as the man in the middle. You get him the ball at the nail, and he's finding Draymond or he's finding whoever's in the dunker spot every time. To be fair, it was some pretty terrible zone defense. It was pretty easy to pick apart, but like Jimmy is doing that. This is a 6'6" dude who is acting in like the Nikola Jokic role in the middle of the zone. It was so impressive. So he's doing all of that stuff to fit in and have a positive impact without forcing himself on the game at all. But then when they need it, he can be that really high-level mismatch attacker, right? He can seal a guy off in the post and get an easy bucket out of it. He can just go out there for you one-on-one, isolation, and create a shot in a way that nobody has been able to for this Warriors team outside of Steph since Kevin Durant. He's getting to the line at an obscene rate, as you mentioned, and he does that in a number of ways.
The Warriors as a team attempt 21 free throws a night, man. Jimmy has given you what is the number? What is that? 2/3? I'm not good at math, man. I mean,
exactly, Logan.
That's
14
crazy.
to 21 is exactly 2/3. I'm proud of you. It is crazy because this is a team that doesn't get to the line. This is a team that doesn't get to the rim very much at all, and they've been one of the worst finishing teams when they do get there. And now you have a guy who off the bounce can get to the rim and the line at a high level, who has a roller can do it, who has a cutter can do it, who has one of the best offensive rebounding wings in basketball can do it. It's just such versatile impact. It has been so great to watch. And then defensively, him and Draymond, man, they just wreak havoc. They are such great off-ball defenders. Specifically with Dre, it's more of the rim protection. Specifically with Jimmy, it's more of the free safety, just anticipating passes, getting into passing lanes. And he's made a couple plays at the rim as well, but he had 4 steals this past game. He's just so smart. And he and Draymond really complement each other so well on both sides of the ball. Like, I have loved that duo. And what I have loved just as much is how Steve Kerr has put them in positions to succeed. Because when this trade went down, I said, well, at the time, I hope that the Dubs can go out and make a subsequent move for Nikola Vucevic, so that way they could play these dudes with a stretch big, not have to deal with a non-spacing 5, considering their shooting issues. That didn't happen. So then I said, I hope that we see a lot of small ball looks with these guys. And we have seen all small ball when Jimmy and Dre are on the floor together, or we've seen Quentin Post at the 5. So not for a minute has Kerr played Jimmy and Dre with Kevon Looney or with TJD, which to me is just excellent coaching, because these guys are obviously better served when they can operate with better spacing on the offensive end. And like, the offense has just been lethal. When those two share the floor, the offense has like a 130 offensive rating. And then defensively, they've also been scrapping, man. There's just an energy in this team right now. Those two, I think, instill a level of fight, and they're going to scrap on the glass and for every loose ball. And they are so active and they are aggressive and they do force turnovers. Like, it's really, really working. And if Quentin Post can keep making shots, that's big, because these last 2 games since they got Jimmy, he has been shooting the shit out of the ball. They don't have anybody else who can replicate that stretch big skill set. Now, Post has his issues defensively, but like, if he can just do that one thing and consistently be a good floor spacer, then I think they should continue doing this. I think they should continue going either small ball or post at the 5 when they have Jimmy and Dre on the floor, because also Jimmy and Dre can cover up for some of Post's defensive limitations with their activity, with the aggregate rim protection and off-ball defense that they do provide. You can't overreact to 2 games from Quentin Post. He hit a little step back, side step 3 the other day, and a lot of people are getting really excited about it. Like, we need to see more. He's a rookie. He was the 52nd pick. There have been plenty of moments where he looks rattled and he looks like he doesn't belong on an NBA floor. But if he can keep this up, that is really, really big. And the final piece, Logan, and why I think the Dubs have looked so good these last 2 games, Steph Curry, man. I mean, let's not bury the lead here. Steph has gone berserk over these last 2 games. He looks, to me, energized. He looks rejuvenated by the addition of Jimmy Butler. I feel like it's given hope to him and to this team as a whole. Well, and he's averaging 36 points per game on 71% true shooting over these 2 games.
And he can just be less tired at the end of games.
100%. But he is putting his best foot forward. I mean, he's being aggressive. He is taking on that lead offensive responsibility and putting up a lot of shots, but he just looks more energized. And he's playing his best basketball of the year in this very recent stretch.
And Post doesn't need to give you but 15 to 20 a night, if that, right?
I agree.
He just needs to come in, shoot 5 threes, make 2 or 3 of them, and those are good minutes, right? Like, you'll take that. And again, the threat of him being out there, if he's hitting, it just opens up everything else for this team offensively. And the last thing I wanted to add, and I think I touched on this a little bit, but just the schematics that Jimmy and Dre can come up with. Like, you talk about their energy. I mean, they're just so smart. Like, whoever they match up against, they can make adjustments in game. And Pods is a brilliant player. Like, these guys, this team is really, really smart and connected. And the other thing too, the Warriors have been so good defensively these last couple of games at forcing turnovers and getting out on the break. I want to say they may have surpassed this by the end of the game. When I stopped watching that Bucks game, I think they had almost 30 points off turnovers in that game. The Warriors are so good at wreaking defensive havoc in certain matchups that if they can limit turnovers on the offensive end because they can shoot themselves in the foot so often.
Totally.
That's scary. Because the Warriors can be a really disruptive defense. And if they can, on that end, just make sure that they're not giving away points, that's a real advantage that I think Golden State has. So they're not a perfect team by any means. I think there are certain matchups that I don't like for Golden State in the playoffs, like we've mentioned throughout this episode, but they're way better than they were before. And this team has life. That's the biggest thing. They're not dead yet. They're not dead yet, man.
You make a great point with the defensive activity and forcing turnovers and getting out in transition. Over these 2 games since Jimmy joined the team, they have 37 turnovers forced, and they have 60 points off turnovers, man. So they are capitalizing on it. And we've just seen them go on these ludicrous runs. like what happened against the Bulls, where they turn a 24-point deficit to a 25-point lead in a quarter of basketball. And like with the Bucks, that game was really competitive. And then there came a point where they just pulled away. Like, they're playing really, really good basketball. And I think the combination of Steph and Jimmy and Dre with capable shooting and high effort defense around them is scary for opposing teams. Not in the way that we're talking about, oh, this team is going to be favored to win a playoff series even, but like, it's significantly better than what they had before. And again, the burden on everybody else is reduced. Now Pods, who has been playing quite well overall since he came back from injury, he had a rough shooting game last night, but he's had some really good games and is looking like the player that I expected him to be. Now he can focus on doing all of his role player stuff and just knock down his shots and rebound and take charges, which he took multiple of in this past game. Moses Moody, I thought played really well, and I really, really like him. I think that basically he should be a lock in those small ball groups alongside Steph and Jimmy and Dre, because he has the solid size, he has the solid defensive tools, he has the shooting, but I thought he had a really good defensive performance against Milwaukee. And then you can get Buddy in there, or you can get Pods in there. At some point, they're going to have to reintegrate Kuminga. I think that that poses some challenges, even though Kuminga was playing well before his injury, just because now you're talking about how do we fit in another non-shooting wing into these lineups. Like, I think if you're going to have Jimmy and Dre as your 4 and 5, you want active defensive players and shooters all around them. And Kuminga is not really that. He's a really good athlete. He can get himself a bucket, but he's not the sort of archetype that fits alongside them. So I think that they'll have to sort of stagger minutes there and figure out what works. And maybe that means that they turn to Post more. But like you said, I think the expectation for Post is you play 15 minutes a night. I think Looney and TJD's minutes are just going to continue to go down. Neither of them have been very good this year. Shout out to Looney, but he's just so limited athletically and offensively, period. I really, really like the small ball stuff. That, to me, is where this team throws their best punch. They get their best players on the floor. They certainly get their best offensive results. And defensively, I think they can do good stuff with their speed and their activity and just their grit. So the West is really, really deep. That's the reality. That's what the Lakers are going to run into here. That's what the Warriors are going to run into here. So Dallas is going to run into every team that we're talking about. There's a whole group that is kind of bunched in there in that tier of teams that definitely should be in the playoffs, but one or two of them is going to miss out because the West is just that good. But I really hope this Warriors team gets into the playoffs, and this move is worth making. I think a lot of people looked at it at the time and they said, oh, well, this isn't going to move the needle to the point where the Warriors are contenders. No, that move didn't exist for them, though. You owe it to Steph to put the best team around him that you can in the twilight of his career. And I think that this Jimmy move did that. I've been so happy with the results so far.
Also, we were talking about the Williams trade getting rescinded for LA, right? They get to keep their assets for the future. So they have a little bit of wiggle room next season, say, if another guy becomes available at the deadline or in the offseason, right? So you still have Connect in those first to move. I think the same logic applies to the Warriors here when we're talking about them down the line. Now, maybe there's more incentive to hold on to Kuminga because you've determined you've determined your window is going to be the next 3 years, and so maybe Kuminga just comes off the bench and is in a lesser role for the next couple of years. Or you still have Kuminga as a trade chip to a young team that could be interested to where you could go out.
But this year they have to decide if they're going to pay him or if they're going to let him go.
I mean, you got to bring him back.
But he's going to want a lot of money, man.
For what? What has he done?
I mean, he was asking for a big-ass contract before this year, and now he's played better this year.
Pay him what, like
he was on
20 mil maybe a year?
Oh, he's going to want more than that.
All right, we can get on.
Yeah. Well, that's why they should have traded him, because I don't think that they should pay him. They should have gotten more out of him.
Well, I mean, if that's the case, then damn, I would have just dealt him at the deadline.
Yeah, but if they do find a way to retain him as an asset, you're right. They don't have cap flexibility because they've committed to paying Jimmy, but they were right to commit to paying Jimmy. You don't make the move for Jimmy if you're not going to pay him. And as I've said, money, age don't concern me nearly as much with the Warriors as they would anywhere else, because you're already paying 36-year-old Steph Curry $60 million a year. And this is the window that matters for you. It's the next 2 years. this season and then the 2 years after. And I think that they've put themselves in a better position to be a good playoff team, which is kind of all that you can ask from the spot that they were in. We've seen more trades out west, Logan. The Western Conference, always an arms race. Who has impressed you more between De'Aaron Fox, now in San Antonio, and Zach LaVine in Sacramento? These two guys obviously were traded in a 3-team deal. Who have you liked more in their new situation?
Definitely De'Aaron, and specifically, it's the Spurs' versatility of their lineups. I was a little bit concerned about how some of this would gel together. You know, if him and Chris Paul would be able to coexist, if Castle. I think they've got a lot of versatility, and I think that CP and Fox can coexist. Also, LaVine's been a little bit inefficient just from behind the arc. He's shooting 19% from deep in these early games. And to be clear, I really like LaVine in Sacramento. I think he just brings juice. He's a really good on-ball and off-ball scorer. I know his shot hasn't been falling, but I just think there's him and Domas complement each other. You know, him and DeRozan already have experience playing together. The offense is going to be great in Sacramento, and the bigger issue in Sacramento has really nothing to do with LaVine. The Kings' defense is a fucking joke. Like, who cares if the Kings get into the playoffs? The other team's just going to score. All right, the Kings score $130. The other team's going to score $150. Like, I'm glad that they didn't go into a full tank. They've just now become kind of like Chicago West in a way, which is unfortunate. But I'm glad that they haven't fully nosedived. But that's really why I like it more, right? The Spurs have this freak in Victor Wembanyama. They can just make them an elite defense single-handedly almost. But I think Fox complements these guys. The one thing that I think I'm a little bit worried about is potentially against some of these jumbo-sized lineups that San Antonio might run into if they get into the postseason party. I really worry about Fox settling for jumpers. Specifically in that Orlando game that we saw from him, he really struggled because he couldn't get all the way downhill. Batadze did a really good job at taking the rim away. And so that's my one concern with Fox. He's been playmaking really well. He's averaging 9 assists per game with the Spurs, 21 points a night. And in those matchups where they don't have a really good rim protector, I mean, Fox is deadly. Like, if he can just get to the rim at will. But the Orlando game just made me a little bit worried in certain defensive matchups where I think against a Memphis, right, against Triple J and an Edey, or against Dallas, I think we could see Fox have some more struggles against teams that have good perimeter personnel to throw at him or really impactful rim protectors. But I've liked the fit. I think the guys can play off of Fox. There are just some matchups in San Antonio that concern me, but I think this is a win for San Antonio. I think they've got their star guard of the future, and I think they're more competitive this season. I think San Antonio is going to make a real playoff push here at the end.
That's the entire goal for them this year. If you get into the playoffs, that's a success. If you get into the play-in, arguably that's a success just because they are sort of trying to crawl back into that race, and it is so hard. There's so many good teams in the West this year. I've also been more impressed with Fox, and I've really liked what I've seen from him. The scoring efficiency hasn't necessarily been crazy, although it's been similar to what it was in Sacramento. But you just feel how impactful it is having a creator of his caliber on the floor alongside Wemby. This is a team that has desperately needed that, and they upgraded in terms of the point guard position, getting Chris Paul, just somebody who can set the table and control the game, but having a guy who's a legitimate high-end scoring threat who can go out there in single coverage and barbecue dudes either with his quickness or with his pull-up shooting. It's so valuable. It's the thing that this team has needed. And I've also been really impressed by Fox's playmaking because he's never really been somebody I view as a plus playmaker. He's been solid there, but I think that we've seen him be really selfless. I think that we've seen him consistently creating drive and kick opportunities for teammates. I think that we have seen him selflessly swinging the ball around the perimeter, moving the ball in transition. He's just doing a lot to not overexert himself here and make sure that he's sort of fitting in and not being a disruptive force in San Antonio, which I like to see from him in a new destination. And he has fit well alongside Chris Paul. Like, I've liked some of the stuff that they do where they have him screen for CP, and then off the short roll he can get to a little midi. Like, He's really complimented everybody around him, and he's been engaged defensively. He always does his thing, creating a couple steals per game, but I think that he has been playing with good effort on that end. I'm really excited about their future. Obviously, there are other pieces that still need to fall into place here long term, but you have your future best player in the world in Wemby, and now you have a guy who I think can, at the very least, be your offensive number 2 in De'Aaron Fox, and then do they need a third star here, big picture, to be like a real contender? Probably, or they need to really, really upgrade the supporting cast, develop or upgrade the supporting cast. But Fox has looked really good, and Castle has also looked really good as of late. He's playing really, really well.
Well, one, to simplify other guys' roles like you're talking about so guys aren't overtasked, right? That's important and how he benefits this entire team. But they've got athletes. Like, I really like the Spurs in the open floor with Fox and Castle and even Sohan sometimes where he's, play finishing in transition or something. They can just – they have a style of play that I really like now. They can play more up-tempo, and Fox really, really helps that. He just helps alleviate everything here. He makes everybody better because they have to do less. And I think it's a real benefit of having Chris Paul and Fox on the floor together, like just having two really smart playmakers like that. They probably do need one more big-time guy to be legitimate contenders, but you don't need to rush.
No, Wemby's in year 2.
Be patient.
Wemby's in year 2. You made your big move of the year, and I think that you should feel very good about that move if you're a Spurs fan. On the LaVine front, like, I've liked his fit in Sacramento. Like you said, the shot just hasn't been falling from 3, but he's such a versatile offensive player with what he can do on and off ball, half court and transition. He's so great. And in the first half against Dallas, he had 4 buckets off of cuts just in the first half. Like, it's really nice seeing him fit into an offense that is more about motion, that is more about player movement and ball movement, and where you're playing with a passing big like Sabonis and you can get the 2-man game going with him. LaVine has the tools to be one of the best off-ball scorers in basketball. I mean, I would say that he is already, but you can really see it unlocked in Sacramento playing alongside passers like he is going to. Also, speaking of Sacramento, poor Dallas, dude. That end to that game last night was ridiculous. I don't know if you saw. Everybody was watching the Lakers game. Sacramento was up 2 with like 15 seconds left. DeRozan took a shot. He didn't need to. He could have just held the ball and waited to get fouled. I think he thought he was going to get fouled. Hold on, we're not there yet. He thought he was going to get fouled and maybe get an and one on the shot, but he didn't get a foul call. Then Dallas calls timeout. ATO, Clay curling around a screen, hits a 3. So now Sacramento is down 1 when they could have just put the game away by hitting free throws, and then DeRozan gets doubled, steps through the double, games it. So Dallas fans had their hope, and then it just got ripped out.
Well, I thought the Kings
were going year they're having.
I thought they were going to run away with that one, and then it ended up going to OT, didn't it?
Yeah. Kyrie was hooping. DeRozan was also hooping. Great game. But suffering apparently is all that Mavs fans will know until the end of time, and I feel so bad for them. So bad. Especially because, Logan, the team that over the last couple years they have decided is their biggest rival, who they saw in the playoffs last year, things are going pretty well for the Oklahoma City Thunder right now, and things just got a little better for them because Chet Holmgren is back, baby. After going down just 10 games into the year, he has returned. What does this mean for the Thunder, and how do you think Chet's looked since coming back, Logan?
Yeah, I mean, it's over for the rest of the West, effectively, now that Chet's back. He only gives you 25 and 22 minutes per game in the 2 games. He's averaging 4.5 blocks per game over that stretch. And Chet's one of the 5 best defenders on the planet. He's just got some of the best defensive instincts I've ever seen. And I'm really encouraged with his fit alongside Hardenstein. I think he might even be better as the low help guy alongside Hardenstein than as just the straight-up rim protector. Now, obviously, this team has versatility where they have looks where they can go Chet at the 5, Hardenstein at the 5, one of those guys off the floor, but they can also play together. And he just has such elite instincts, man. As a pick-and-roll defender, he's so agile. Like, being able to switch off of the ball handler and recover in ways that you shouldn't be able to. Like, he's so smart. And, I mean, I think as Chet gets even bigger and bulks up and is even stronger, I think he's even going to be better as a pick and roll and on-ball defender. But He's so good at sacrificing space, but without conceding looks, like in recovering in that way. And I just think the league's in trouble, man. You guys let them get Hartenstein. Chet's back. Oh my God, this is going to be the greatest defense I've ever watched.
For real, dude. Well, already they're in that conversation statistically, like
without Chet.
Without Chet for most of the year. It's so ridiculous what they've done defensively this year, where they might still be number one in relative defensive rating in the modern era. They've been.
I'm pretty sure they are.
They have been for basically the whole year, and their defense has remained just head and shoulders above everybody else in the league this year without their best defensive player for a vast majority of the season. So that's terrifying. I have never seen a team with this much defensive talent. I have never seen a team with this many high-level perimeter defenders, as I've said many times over, and then to pair that with this sort of dual rim protector look, where you have an elite top-tier rim protector in Chet Holmgren, and you have another good one who gobbles up rebounds in Hartenstein, and both these guys are mobile, and they can guard in space, and everybody around them. It's the best group of helping wings that you'll ever see. It's one of the most aggressive defenses ever. It's the best defense we've seen in a long, long time in terms of forcing turnovers, and then they're better than anybody at capitalizing on them out in transition. The total length and speed here is absurd. The instincts, the hands, this defense is one of a kind, and now they just have more options. Now they can adjust to the matchup so seamlessly. They can go double bigs against a team like Denver, who they already gave fits to in their first game of the year when they only had one big because they just doubled the shit out of Jokic, and they made everybody else try to make decisions under pressure and make shots under pressure, and they couldn't do it. But now they can just go with the format that we've seen before, where you have Hartenstein as the big body to throw at Jokic, and then you have Chet as one of the best roamers in basketball against any team with an elite guard, with multiple elite perimeter players. They have this A-plus combination to throw at them. Even the Lakers we were talking about, I think that Boston is the only team that you would say has two guys in Jalen and Tatum who like physically match up to guarding both a Luka and LeBron. But the Thunder still have Lou Dort, and they still have all of these chaos agents who, if you blitz them, like they're just going to force even the best dudes into turnovers, and they can take the ball out of their hands, and they can force a Jackson Hayes to try to make decisions, which is not good for the Lakers offense. And they rotate faster than anybody else. They help better than anybody else. It's unbelievable what they're going to be able to do on that side of the ball. And I think the rim protection with both him and Hartenstein on the floor is absurd. But again, that's just one of many looks. Like their first game against Toronto, they play 6 minutes in the first quarter together, and then they basically didn't play together for the rest of the first half. It's one of them out there alone, or it's even neither of them in certain looks. Options, man. Options, versatility. That is what this Oklahoma City team has in a way that I don't know if I've ever seen before. And then offensively for Chet, he's just going to get more comfortable. It's just going to take a little time. He's coming off of a major injury, but earlier this year, he made it very clear that he had taken a leap with his comfort as a ball handler, attacking off the bounce, getting downhill, getting to the line, being physical around the rim. Chet clearly looked like a top 20 player before he got injured earlier this season, and he is the sort of guy who can be an offensive star for you on top of being a DPOY caliber defender, and that's exactly what this team has needed. They've needed that other really reliable offensive player, because Shea is having one of the great guard seasons that we've seen. He's doing one of the great offensive carry jobs, but you get into a playoff series, you want to know that you can count on a J-Dub. You want to know that there's somebody else out there who can also step up, and to me, Chet is that guy who adds spacing when they play him out there as the lone five. But also, I think that they've been able to make him and Hartenstein work together offensively so far. I think both guys have been very cognizant about making the spacing work. Hartenstein, although he isn't a shooter, is still such a great release valve with his floater touch. He still brings so much value as a passer. And then Chet can always space the floor. I think those two work together pretty well offensively. And we even saw them run a little big on big pick and roll. I would like to see more of that, where Hartenstein screens for Chet. There's just so much talent here there are so many different things that they can do and so many different ways that they can beat you. And by the way, maybe the bigger story of this recent stretch for the Thunder, even than Chet Holmgren coming back, is the play of Aaron Wiggins. I really wanted them to move Wiggins along with the necessary draft capital and other contracts to get Cam Johnson, either Wiggins or Isaiah Joe, whoever they felt that they wanted to move, just because I thought Cam Johnson was such a perfect fit. I still think that they should have done that. But Aaron Wiggins is a talented basketball player, and we've seen several times this year that like he has taken something of a leap from last year as an on-ball creator, as a scorer. But now these last 6 games, he's giving you 23 points per game on 71% true shooting, and like he is a really good athlete. And he does bring some of that self-creation off the bounce that this team just hasn't had outside of Shea and J-Dub, who even has been inconsistent. I'm not saying that I'm banking on Aaron Wiggins going out there and being a big offensive contributor in a playoff series, but he's showing you something. And he's a really good cutter, and he's really good in transition, and he's a solid spot-up player. So I think it's encouraging to see one of the role players step up like that, because you've sort of been waiting, will anybody separate themselves from the pack offensively? And this is the best stretch that we've seen offensively from any of these role players. So I just think you continue to feel better and better about OKC as a clear favorite out west, and as the team I picked to win the title before the year that I just feel more confident in now. By the way, in this 6-game stretch, they've won all those games by an average of 26 points, and they are now the number 1 team all time in terms of net rating, Logan.
And they're like the youngest average team in the league, right? Like age-wise. I mean, they're like...
They might still be. They're certainly
like
up
20,
there.
It's like 24. I mean, it's insane. I think that the one thing that is going to determine if Oklahoma City is going to get this thing done that we've harped on all year is the offensive ceiling that they can reach with Chet, with J-Dub, with, you know, the aggregate shooting. But I think this is going to be one of the greatest defenses we've ever seen.
Yep.
So there's only a certain level that Oklahoma City really has to reach, and they just haven't shown us any weaknesses. I mean, down their second best player, they've been the best team in basketball. Down their most important defensive player, they've been the best defense in basketball. I would be stunned if the fully healthy Thunder didn't make it out of the West at this point, and a little part of me would be kind of shocked if they didn't win the title. That's my expectation for Oklahoma City right now, man. They are so unbelievably dominant.
That's what the numbers would say. If you look at the teams that have the best net rating ever, it's the 96 Bulls behind this year's Thunder now. It's the 97 Bulls. It's the 2017 Warriors. Last year's Celtics team is up there pretty high. But, like, it's all teams that have had historic regular seasons and then dominant playoff runs en route to a title. I still don't know if I could say that I'd be shocked if the Thunder don't win the title this year, though. I just think Boston is that good. And I can still see the outcome where the shooting just isn't what it needs to be for OKC, and that's what holds them back. Now, as I've said many times before, I'm going to bet on their historic defense, and I'm going to bet on their insane versatility, and I'm going to bet on the fact that they have easily the best creator and offensive player on the floor in that series. But is the margin that big? No, just because Boston is that insane. I think these are both teams that win the title most years.
I respect Boston, too. I've just never seen a defense like this.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And when you say you've never seen a defense like this, in terms of caliber, sure, but also just in terms of the way that they get it done. It's unbelievable. The speed,
guys
the
they have, dude.
Yeah, I mean, if you think you're going to get a break for a second, you're just wrong. Okay, Lou Dort's off the floor. Now it's Cason Wallace. Okay, now it's Alex Caruso. J-Dub is working as your low man. Shea is working as your low man. Oh, and then they also have a top-tier defensive big and another really good one. It's stupid. And then Wiggins can come in and compete defensively. There's so many dudes. To me, the best defense this century is the 04 Pistons. It's going to be a hell of a task for anybody to uproot them, because even though OKC, I believe, is still number 1 in terms of relative defensive rating this century, the thing is, Detroit didn't have their full defense until midway through that year. After they traded for Sheed, I want to say they had something like an 88 defensive rating.
Better
and then in
than
the playoffs, they had an 88 defensive rating.
Better than that San Antonio team, too.
That San Antonio team was great, but to me, what just puts it over the top is that Detroit had a historic regular season and then had one of the greatest, if not the greatest, playoff defensive runs that we've seen since the peak 60 Celtics. I think they're the best defense since the Bill Russell Celtics. The Pistons.
To follow up too, does Boston last year at full health factor into that at all?
Boston was a great defense last year. I think that probably 2022 Boston was a better defense. I think Robert Williams was just so excellent that year. Yeah, they just had insane versatility and switchability. I think that the Timberwolves last year are a really good defense, a great defense. I think that this team is showing a level of disruptiveness, of chaos causing that I have never seen. And I think that they are showing an ability to be considered the best defense since the 04 Pistons. Has to translate to the playoffs, but that's the sort of stuff that they're doing right now. It should be one of the best defenses we've ever seen. And then they have a guy having one of the best offensive seasons that we've ever seen. You do the math, man. That's a pretty insane combination. And now Chet is back, and Chet is a unicorn. And I believe in Chet very, very much. I think he is a freak, and I still don't think he's appreciated enough. And once he gets back to that place offensively, man, all that he has to do is get comfortable playing with Hartenstein and just get confident in his own ability as a shooter, attacking off the bounce, just look like the Chet that we saw in the first 10 games. And then, yeah, this team should win the title. Competition is great. That's the only thing. The only team that I think has a prayer of beating them in the West is Denver. And I still think that that would be really hard because this defense is so well built to guard them, well built to deal with Jokic, well built to swarm shooters around him, well built to give Jamal Murray the worst series of his lifetime. That's the big one. They're just so insane there. And then I think that Denver would have a pretty damn hard time dealing with Shea in particular. But the reason I say Denver's the only team that has a chance is just because their offense is that insane, and they have the Jokic factor, which is just like the great equalizer. Anybody else, I'm not taking any gritty, hard-nosed defensive team over them. Nobody can do it better. Even if there are bigger, more physical teams like Dallas, still going to bet on the OKC defense, and then the fact that they have clearly the superior offense to any of the teams that are trying to follow that mold. This team's crazy, man. It's crazy, and I still don't know if there's a full appreciation for how historic what they're doing is. They're 43-9. They haven't had their second best player for most of the year, and they're number one all time in net rating. Scary, scary stuff in Oklahoma City. On that note, appreciate you guys tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this one. Hope you have enjoyed all of the basketball, all of the new players and their new situations. It's been super entertaining. I am going to try to make multiple film breakdowns on some of these new stars in their new spots, so we can have some visual components to pair with all of the analysis. So stay tuned in for those. And if you want to be locked in for all of our content, where you can find it, our YouTube channel is the spot for our full-length shows and the aforementioned video essays and film breakdowns. If you want to just listen to all of our full shows, you can do so across all audio platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your stuff. And you can follow us across social media, TikTok, Instagram, @NerdSesh, Twitter, @Nerd_Sesh, to see clips from the show, graphics from the show, and all of our short-form trivia content, including in yesterday's edition, a sneaky little edit in there about AD and Luka that hopefully made some of you cry. I know it made me cry several times over. So that's all across social. And you can join our Discord if you want. The link to that is at our Linktree, which is linked in our social media bios. You can also check out our merch at breakingd.com, which is also linked in our Linktree. With that, as always, I've been Carson Brabber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.